Lisa Carter lived in a quiet neighborhood in Oregon with her 17-year-old son. Ethan, after her husband passed away 5 years ago, life had slowly found a calm rhythm again. She worked from home as an interior designer, spent her evenings cooking, and tried to fill the silence that used to hurt. When Ethan entered high school, the house started to feel alive once more. His friends often visited, sometimes to study, sometimes to play games, and mostly just to hang out. Their laughter brought warmth to the walls that had once echoed with loneliness. Lisa didn't mind. In fact, she loved having them around. She would bake cookies, prepare snacks, and listen to their stories about school and sports. It reminded her of her own teenage years, and she enjoyed being part of their noisy, happy world. At first, she didn't notice how much attention she was getting from them. To her, they were just Ethan's friends, young, polite boys who appreciated a home-cooked meal. But over time, little things began to stand out. They would linger in the kitchen when she was cooking, offering to help even when there was nothing to do. They'd compliment her lasagna, her cookies, and even her sense of style. Sometimes she caught them watching her when they thought she wasn't looking. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it did make her pause. She was 42 and had long stopped thinking of herself in that way. She was a mother, not someone young people looked at twice. Yet their glances told a different story. Ryan, one of Ethan's closest friends, was the first one she truly noticed. He was quiet and well-mannered, the kind of boy every mother liked her son to hang out with. One Saturday afternoon, she brought a tray of cookies to the living room where the boys were watching a game. When she bent down to place the tray on the table, she looked up and saw Ryan staring at her. His expression caught between surprise and nervousness. The moment their eyes met, he turned red and looked away. Lisa smiled softly, pretending she hadn't noticed. It was just a glance, she told herself, but her heart gave a strange little flutter. She didn't want to read too much into it. Maybe he was just embarrassed. Maybe he was lost in thought. Still, the moment stayed with her. After that, she began to see more signs. Another friend, Jason, would always find excuses to talk to her about random things: music, recipes, even college plans. He'd say, "Mrs. Carter, you should start a YouTube channel. Everyone would watch you cook." She laughed it off, but there was something in his tone, an admiration that went beyond simple respect. The others would tease him about it, and he'd blush and change the subject. Ethan, unaware of the deeper meaning, just rolled his eyes at his friends. For him, it was all innocent fun. But Lisa, watching quietly, began to sense that something had shifted. She wasn't flattered in a proud way. It was more like she'd suddenly remembered that she was still seen. After years of focusing on work, chores, and raising her son, she had forgotten how it felt to be noticed. Still, that realization made her uneasy. She didn't want to misinterpret youthful politeness as anything else, nor did she want to encourage any confusion. So she decided to keep her distance, at least a little. She would still host the gatherings, but she would stay in her room more. Let the boys handle their snacks and avoid joining their conversations unless necessary. One Friday evening, the group arrived again for a movie night. Lisa smiled, greeted them all, and returned to the kitchen. Through the half-open door, she heard bits of their conversation. One of them whispered, "Ethan, your mom's amazing. How does she do everything?" Another voice laughed and added, "She's way too cool." "You're lucky, man." Ethan just chuckled. "She's my mom. Guys, relax." They laughed it off, but Lisa felt her face warm. It wasn't uncomfortable, just unexpected. She didn't know if she should feel proud or nervous. When she brought in popcorn later, the room went silent for a second. She noticed it, though she pretended she didn't. The boys quickly started joking again, filling the air with chatter. She smiled, placed the bowls down, and left quietly. In the kitchen, she stood by the counter, staring at the empty tray, wondering why her heart was beating faster than it should. She reminded herself it was nothing, just harmless teenage admiration. But deep down, something stirred, something she hadn't felt in years, a quiet awareness of her own presence. Later that night, after everyone had left, Ethan came into the kitchen to grab a drink. "Thanks for the food, Mom. The guys love coming here," he said casually. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm glad they feel at home." He nodded, then added, "They all think you're awesome, you know." She laughed softly, trying to sound casual. "Do they now?" "Yeah," he said with a grin. "They say you're the nicest mom ever." Lisa smiled, hiding her thoughts behind that familiar motherly warmth. She didn't want him to know that their compliments had affected her more than she wanted to admit. When she finally went to bed, she couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed the evening, the glances, the laughter, the small, innocent compliments. They weren't wrong. She was friendly and kind. But that wasn't why her heart felt uneasy. It was because for the first time in a long time, she felt something new inside her, reminder that she wasn't invisible, that she was still a woman with emotions, still capable of being seen as more than just someone's mother. She lay there in the dark, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the distance, and thought about the years she had spent pushing her own feelings aside. Ever since her husband's passing, she had promised herself she would stay strong for Ethan. Her world had become about schedules, Kale's, and responsibility. There was no space for her own heart. But that night, a quiet thought whispered in her mind maybe it was time to acknowledge that she was still human, still allowed to feel, still allowed to exist as herself. The next morning, she made breakfast as usual. Ethan and his friends were leaving early for soccer practice. As they rushed out, Ryan stopped by the door, holding his sports bag. "Thanks for the cookies, Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice shy but sincere. "You're really kind." She smiled gently. "You're welcome, Ryan. Good luck today." When the door closed behind them, she sighed. The house fell silent again, but it no longer felt as lonely. Lisa walked to the window and looked at the empty street. A breeze moved through the trees, carrying a mix of spring air and something softer, like the start of a change she couldn't quite name. She didn't know what it meant yet. She knew one thing for sure. Life had quietly reminded her that she was still alive inside. Not through grand romance, not through anyone's affection, but through the simple realization that she could still feel warmth in her heart. And as she stood there, smiling faintly to herself, Lisa realized that this small spark of awareness was the beginning of something new, something she hadn't felt in years. After that evening, Lisa started keeping a gentle distance. She didn't want to make anything awkward, not for Ethan and not for his friends. She told herself that she was just being careful, but deep down she knew something inside her had changed. The boys still came over often, filling the house with laughter, music, and the smell of popcorn. Lisa still greeted them with her usual warmth. But she avoided lingering in the living room or sitting with them during their movie nights. Instead, she stayed in the kitchen, pretending to be busy while listening to their happy chatter from a distance. It wasn't that she didn't enjoy their company anymore. She did. It was just that she could sense things she hadn't before. Compliments that once felt innocent now made her feel uneasy. When Jason said, "Mrs. Carter, you always look so nice." Or when Ryan offered to help her carry groceries, she smiled politely, but inside she was unsure how to respond. She didn't want to encourage anything or send the wrong message. She was proud of how well behaved they were, and she cared for them like she would for any of Ethan's friends. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore how those small moments made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Noticed. Appreciated. Alive. Ethan didn't notice anything unusual. He was busy finishing his final year of high school, juggling soccer practice, exams, and college applications. Most nights he'd come home late, eat whatever his mom had left for him, and fall asleep on the couch. Lisa would cover him with a blanket, smile quietly, and turn off the lights. Watching him grow into an independent young man filled her with pride, but it also reminded her that one day soon, the house would be empty again. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Ethan surprised her with a question that stopped her heart for a moment. "Mom," he said, his voice calm but serious, "my friends really like you." Lisa looked up from her tea and smiled softly. "That's sweet of them." But Ethan didn't smile back. "No, I mean, they really like you." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" he sighed. "They talk about you all the time. How kind you are, how you listen, how you make everyone feel safe. They say you're different from other parents." Lisa laughed lightly, trying to brush off the tension. "Well, I guess that's a good thing. I'm glad they feel comfortable here." Ethan nodded but didn't look convinced. "Yeah, it's good. But sometimes I think they like you a little too much." Lisa froze for a second. "Too much," she repeated softly. He shrugged. "It's harmless. They just admire you. That's all." She forced a smile, pretending it didn't bother her. "They're young boys, Ethan. I'm just your mom. Don't worry about it." But that night, when Ethan went to his room, she sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at her half-empty cup of tea. His words kept echoing in her mind. "They like you too much." She didn't feel proud or flattered. Instead, she felt a strange mix of guilt and confusion. Was she doing something wrong? Was she being too open, too friendly? She had always treated them like her own, offering advice, cheering for them at games, listening when they talked about their dreams. She never imagined that any of it could be taken the wrong way. Still, she couldn't deny that the attention had awakened something inside her. It wasn't attraction, but rather a reminder of what it meant to be seen. She hadn't been in love or even close to anyone since her husband passed away. Her world had become about responsibility, bills, work, and parenting. The idea that anyone could see her as more than that felt both strange and dangerous. She didn't want to feel it, yet she couldn't completely ignore it either. The next few weeks passed quietly. Lisa continued her daily routines, work in the morning, errands in the afternoon, and cooking dinner for Ethan in the evening. But in small moments, she caught herself thinking about her life differently. She noticed her reflection more often, paid attention to how she dressed, even put on a bit of perfume before guests arrived. It wasn't for anyone in particular. It was for herself. After years of just surviving, she finally wanted to feel like herself again. One night, she was sitting on the porch reading a book when Ethan came out and sat beside her. The air was cool, and the stars shimmered above them. For a while, they didn't say anything. Then, quietly, he asked, "Mom, do you ever get lonely?" Lisa looked at him, startled. "Why would you ask that?" "I don't know," Ethan said, staring at the dark sky. "You're always smiling, but sometimes it feels like you're hiding something behind it." Lisa tried to find the right words. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I have you. That's all I need." He gave a small smile but shook his head. "You won't have me forever, Mom. I'll go to college next year. You deserve someone who makes you happy." Her chest tightened at his words. She wanted to tell him she was fine, that she didn't need anyone, that she had built her life around being strong. But the truth was, she did feel lonely sometimes, in the quiet after he left for school. In the long nights when there was no one to talk to, in the silence of her own thoughts. Still, she smiled at him and said, "Maybe someday. But right now, you're my world." Ethan leaned over and hugged her. "You've always taken care of me, Mom. Just promise you'll take care of yourself, too." That hug stayed with her long after he went to bed. It was warm, comforting, and heartbreaking all at once. She realized how quickly time was passing, how the little boy she used to hold in her arms was almost grown. And soon he would have his own life, his own home, his own family. When she went inside, she looked around the living room, the soft light, the photos on the wall, the empty couch. For years, this house had been her whole world. But now it felt like a waiting room for a life she hadn't stepped into yet. The next day, she found herself standing in front of her mirror, really looking at herself. Not as a mother, not as a widow, but as a woman. There were fine lines around her eyes, a few strands of gray in her hair, but there was still warmth, still light. She smiled faintly. For the first time in years, she didn't see loss. She saw strength. That weekend, when Ethan's friends came over again, she welcomed them like always. The boys laughed, joked, and filled the house with energy. But Lisa didn't feel uneasy anymore. She knew where she stood. She was kind because it was in her nature, not because she needed attention. She was warm because her heart was still capable of love, the quiet kind, the human kind. As she watched them all teasing Ethan in the living room, Lisa felt a sense of peace. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was real. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that the story of her heart wasn't over yet. It was just changing. That night, when Ethan thanked her again for hosting his friends, She smiled, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "You make me proud every single day." He grinned and said, "I learned from the best." And for the first time in a long while, Lisa didn't feel lonely at all. She felt whole. Ethan's 18th birthday arrived on a warm Saturday evening in early June. The house, which had once been filled with quiet routines, was now alive with music, laughter, and the sound of celebration. Balloons hung in the corners, the kitchen smelled of Lisa's famous lasagna, and the backyard glowed with string lights that Ethan had helped her put up. She had spent the whole day cooking and decorating, wanting to make this night perfect for him. Ethan's friends started arriving just before sunset. They brought gifts, snacks, and their usual energy that filled every empty corner of the house. Lisa smiled as she welcomed them in, though a familiar flutter of nervousness stirred inside her. It wasn't discomfort, just awareness. She knew that many of them admired her, not in a childish way, but in the gentle, respectful way young people sometimes admired those who had lived a little more than they had. She handled it with quiet grace, as she always did. "Mrs. Carter, this looks amazing," Jason said, walking in with a grin. "You outdid yourself." Lisa laughed softly. "Thank you, Jason, but it's Ethan's day, not mine." Ryan followed behind him, carrying a gift bag and smiling shyly. "Happy birthday, Ethan, and I'm Mrs. Carter. That smells incredible." "Thank you, Ryan," she said kindly. "You boys just enjoy yourselves." The evening went by quickly. Laughter echoed through the house. The music played softly. And Lisa watched from the kitchen as Ethan and his friends joked around, teasing one another, happy and carefree. It made her heart swell with pride. Her son had grown into a kind, confident young man, surrounded by good friends. For a moment, she forgot her worries and simply enjoyed watching him. When it was time for cake, everyone gathered around the table. Lisa brought out the chocolate cake she'd baked herself, Ethan's favorite. And everyone began to sing. Ethan's eyes sparkled as he looked around the room. And when he blew out the candles, he turned to his mom with a warm smile. "Thanks, Mom, for everything." Lisa's chest tightened at his words. She smiled, brushing a tear that had appeared in her eyes. "Always, sweetheart, always." After the cake and presents, the group moved to the living room to watch a movie. Lisa quietly cleaned up in the kitchen, humming to herself. She didn't notice that Ethan was watching her from the other room, his friends busy with snacks and laughter. He saw her moving gracefully, tidying up with her usual calm care. For a moment, he thought about how much she had done for him over the years, every meal, every late-night talk, every sacrifice. She had given up so much for him, and now he was about to leave for college. A wave of gratitude and sadness washed over him. By the time the guests left that night, the house was quiet again. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock filled the silence. Ethan stayed behind in the kitchen, helping his mom clean the dishes. They worked quietly side by side for a while, comfortable in the stillness. "Did you have fun?" Lisa asked softly, drying a plate. "Yeah," Ethan said with a smile. "It was great. Thanks for doing all this. You don't have to thank me. You only turn 18 once." He nodded, leaning against the counter. Then, after a pause, he said something unexpected. "Mom, do you ever feel lonely?" Lisa froze, the dish towel in her hand. She turned to him, her expression gentle but surprised. "Why would you ask that?" "I don't know," he said, looking down. "You're always happy, always smiling. But sometimes it feels like you're putting on a brave face." Her heart softened. He was more observant than she thought. "I'm fine, honey. I have you. That's enough." He hesitated, then spoke again, his tone quieter now. "You won't have me forever, Mom. I'll be in college soon. You deserve someone too. Someone who makes you happy." Lisa felt her throat tighten. She wanted to tell him that she was fine, that she didn't need anyone. But deep down, she knew he was right. There were nights when the silence in the house was too heavy, when she longed for someone to talk to, someone who understood her heart. But she didn't want Ethan to worry about that. So she smiled faintly and said, "Maybe one day. But right now, seeing you happy makes me happy." He walked over and hugged her tightly. "You're the best mom ever." Lisa held him close, her eyes closing as she breathed in the scent of his shampoo, the same kind he'd used since he was 12. For a moment, she wished she could freeze time, keep him here, safe, young, and still hers. But time never stopped for anyone. When he pulled away, he smiled and said, "Promise me something." "What's that?" she asked softly. "When I leave, promise you won't just sit here alone. Go out, meet people, live your life. You've spent so much time taking care of me. It's time someone takes care of you." Her chest ached at his words. "I promise," she whispered. That night, after Ethan went to bed, Lisa sat by the window, staring out at the quiet street. The party lights still glowed faintly in the backyard, swaying in the breeze. She thought about his words over and over. "You deserve someone who makes you happy." They lingered in her heart like a quiet echo. She thought about her life, the years that had passed since her husband died, the way she had built everything around her son. Every smile, every plan, every decision, it had all been for Ethan. But now, as he grew older and began stepping into his own life, she realized that she needed to rediscover her own. Not through anyone else's affection, but through remembering who she was before life became about survival. The next morning, Lisa woke early. The house was still. She made coffee and sat on the porch as the sun rose, the golden light touching the trees. For the first time in a long while, she felt calm, not because everything was perfect, but because she understood something new. Love wasn't always about romance or longing. Sometimes it was about letting go, about giving someone wings and being strong enough to watch them fly. When Ethan came downstairs later, she greeted him with her usual warm smile. "Good morning, birthday boy," he grinned, rubbing his eyes. "Morning, Mom." As they ate breakfast together, the air between them felt lighter, full of unspoken understanding. Ethan was ready to face his future, and Lisa was beginning to find peace with her past. She looked at her son, the same boy who used to hold her hand while crossing the street, and realized that every sacrifice, every lonely night had led to this moment of quiet pride. She knew her life was entering a new chapter. And while the idea of an empty house scared her, it also made her heart beat with quiet hope. Maybe she would travel. Maybe she'd pick up painting again. Maybe one day she'd meet someone new. But for now, sitting across from her son, Lisa felt full of love, gratitude, and something she hadn't felt in years: peace. The party was over, but a new story had begun. And for Lisa, that was enough. Weeks passed after Ethan's birthday, and the house slowly returned to its usual calm rhythm. The decorations were gone, the music had faded, and the laughter that once filled the rooms was now a quiet memory. Ethan was busy with his final exams and college plans, often out with his friends or studying at the library. Lisa, on the other hand, found herself adjusting to the silence again. It wasn't the heavy silence she once feared. It was softer now, peaceful, but tinged with a quiet ache. She had always known this day would come, the moment when her son would start building his own life. Still, it felt strange to sit at the kitchen table and realize how quickly time had passed. One Friday evening, Ethan came home with Ryan, his polite and thoughtful friend. Lisa hadn't seen Ryan much since the birthday party, and she was pleasantly surprised when he greeted her with a warm smile. "Hi, Mrs. Carter," he said, setting his bag down. "I hope it's okay we hang out here for a bit. We're working on a project." "Course," Lisa replied kindly. "You boys know this house is always open." She prepared them some lemonade and sandwiches, just like she used to. Watching them laugh and talk brought back old memories, all those weekends when Ethan's friends filled her home with energy. But this time she noticed how different everything felt. Ethan was more mature now, his shoulders broader, his tone more confident. And Ryan wasn't the shy boy he used to be. He spoke more easily, with a calmness that reminded her of someone growing into adulthood. As the evening went on, Lisa found herself sitting with them for a while, listening as they discussed their project. They were talking about future plans, dreams, and what life might look like after graduation. "I'm not sure what I'll study yet," Ryan said. "Maybe engineering. My parents think it's practical." Lisa smiled. "You're young. You have time to figure it out. Just make sure you do something that makes you proud, not just what others expect." Ryan looked at her for a moment, thoughtful. You always say things that make sense, Mrs. Carter. You really care, don't you? I try to, she said softly. Life's too short not to care. They worked late into the night. Around 10, Ethan yawned and stretched. I'm exhausted. I'm going to take a quick shower, he said, heading upstairs. That left Lisa and Ryan alone in the quiet living room. She began gathering the empty glasses, but Ryan stood up quickly. I'll help, he offered. You don't have to, she said with a smile. I want to, he replied, taking a few plates and following her to the kitchen. They worked in silence for a few minutes, the only sound being the gentle clinking of dishes and the hum of the dishwasher. Then, in a low voice, Ryan said, Mrs. Carter, can I tell you something? Lisa turned slightly, curious. Of course. He hesitated, then spoke softly. You've helped me more than you know. When my parents were fighting last year, I used to come here just to feel calm again. You'd always smile and ask how I was doing even when I didn't know how to answer. You made me feel like things were going to be okay. Lisa's heart tightened. She hadn't known that. She had just been kind the way she always tried to be. But hearing his words made her realize how deeply small gestures could matter. She smiled gently. I'm glad I could help, Ryan. Sometimes all we need is someone who listens. He nodded. You did more than listen. You made me believe that good people still exist. The words lingered in the air for a moment. There was nothing uncomfortable about them, just sincerity and warmth. Lisa felt tears sting her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. You're a good kid, Ryan, she said softly. You'll do well in life. When Ethan came back downstairs, everything felt normal again. They watched a short movie before Ryan left for home. Before stepping out, he turned to Lisa and said, Thank you for everything, Mrs. Carter. His voice carried quiet emotion. And then he was gone. That night, Lisa stood by the window, looking at the faint glow of the streetlights outside. The breeze carried the scent of spring through the open window, and she wrapped her arms around herself, lost in thought. The conversation with Ryan replayed in her mind. It reminded her that kindness had power, not the kind that came from attention or admiration, but the kind that healed unseen wounds. She realized that her warmth had touched people without her even noticing. As the days passed, Lisa noticed that Ethan spent more time outside the house. He was preparing for college, visiting campuses, spending evenings with friends. The house grew quieter again, and though part of her missed the noise, another part of her was learning to enjoy the peace. She read more, took walks around the neighborhood, even joined a local art class, something she hadn't done since her 20s. Slowly, she was building a life that belonged to her, not just the version of herself that existed for someone else. One evening, Ethan returned home later than usual. He found his mom sitting on the porch, sketchbook in hand, drawing the sunset. Hey, Mom, he said, sitting beside her. You've been busy lately, she smiled. Trying new things. It feels good. He looked at her and grinned. You seem happier. I think I am, she admitted. Maybe for the first time in a long time. Ethan leaned back, watching the colors fade in the sky. Ryan told me he really looks up to you, he said casually. Said you helped him through a tough time. Lisa smiled softly. He's a good kid. I'm proud of how far he's come. Ethan nodded. You have that effect on people. You make them feel safe. His words were simple, but they touched her heart deeply. She looked at her son, now almost a man, and realized he had grown into everything she had hoped he would be. Kind, honest, and full of empathy. In that moment, she felt something shift inside her. The loneliness she once carried was no longer heavy. It had turned into something gentler, a quiet kind of love that came from acceptance. The next morning, else the sun rose, Lisa brewed her coffee and stood by the window. She thought about the years behind her, the loss, the rebuilding, the unexpected attention, and the soft rediscovery of herself. Every moment, good and bad, had brought her here to this calm, steady peace. She didn't need anyone's admiration. She didn't need to chase what was gone. Her worth wasn't measured by who looked at her, but by the lives she had touched along the way. When Ethan came downstairs, half asleep and smiling, she handed him a cup of coffee. Big day ahead?" she asked. He nodded. "College interview. You'll do great," she said confidently. "You always do." As he left for the day, she watched him from the doorway, her heart full. The boy who once needed her for everything was now ready to face the world. And she, the woman who once thought her story was over, had quietly found a new beginning. Lisa turned back toward the house, sunlight pouring through the windows, and smiled to herself. Her life wasn't lonely anymore. It was full of memories, lessons, and a new kind of hope. Because in rediscovering love for others, she had finally rediscovered love for herself.